Right now on Denver 7 News at 4, recovering from the pandemic's financial blows is still a struggle for many Denver metro businesses.
There's a lot of pressure and problems that you deal on a daily basis. And when the first thing in the morning you'll get a phone call saying you got robbed, it just adds on top of that.
How an overnight crime has set this family-owned business back even further.
Lax building codes are being blamed for the increasing damage we're seeing from natural disasters. How more places are now looking to address this. And there's a lot of focus on helping dogs and cats that have been neglected or abused. But a growing number of rescues are helping farm animals like these in the same situation.
It means a lot, actually. It just shows the resilience. You know, it kind of tells its own story.
Plus, a sense of normalcy in Superior. Months after the Marshall Fire destroyed a doggy daycare, how resilience and community came together to reopen their doors. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Jason Grenauer. First at 4, a former Loveland police officer has been sentenced to 5 years in prison for his arrest of a woman with dementia. Austin Hopp pleaded guilty to second-degree assault in March and was sentenced just over an hour ago. He arrested Karen Garner in 2020 for shoplifting from a Walmart. Garner's arm was broken and her shoulder was dislocated during that arrest. The U.S. Senate will vote next week on a bill that would make abortion legal across the U.S. This announcement comes just days after a Supreme Court draft opinion was leaked to Politico, indicating the court could overturn Roe v. Wade. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is still pushing for any Republican votes that he can get.
Republicans will have two choices. They can own the destruction of women's rights, or they can reverse course and work to prevent the damage.
Now, as for the investigation into the leak itself, Chief Justice John Roberts has directed the court's marshal, Army Colonel Gail Curley, to lead the probe. Curley is a career Army lawyer and oversees the Supreme Court police. John Ramsey, the father of Jonbenet Ramsey, wants new technology to test for DNA in the investigation into his daughter's murder. And Governor Jared Polis says the state will look into how the technology could be used to potentially help try to solve the case. Jonbenet was murdered in Boulder back in 1996. Her father says he supports a petition asking the state to use genetic genealogy to try to find her killer. Ramsey was on CNN this morning saying there were items from the crime scene that were never tested for DNA. He says if evidence is tested, a match or similar match could show up in a public database.
They find a similar match, not an exact match, but a similar match, and then basically create a family tree going backwards from that point. DNA is the answer in our case. I've been told that by experienced detectives. They said this is a DNA case, it'll be solved by DNA.
Now, Ramsey says the technology has been used to solve about a dozen cases across the U.S. It's had success here in Colorado as well. Now, that petition also asks for the case to be transferred from Boulder Police. Ramsey says he hasn't had any communication with Boulder PD in 3 years. A family-owned restaurant in Englewood loses thousands of dollars after a suspect broke in early Wednesday. Surveillance footage shows a man breaking into the Blazing Bird. The owner, Artem Muradyan, says the man broke the lockbox and gained access to keys. The surveillance video captures the man rushing through that front door, making his way behind the registers. Thousands were taken in a matter of seconds.
Around $2,000 were taken. And it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for a family business. Might not be a big deal for like big corporations and things, but for the family-owned business, $2,000, it's a lot of money.
Now, so far, no arrests have been made. A crime map shows there have been at least 28 burglaries in Englewood this year alone. Well, after a few months of being closed because of the Marshall Fire, one local doggy daycare in Superior is open once again. Danelle Slater, the owner of Dog Tag, reopened the daycare a couple of weeks ago. The work leading up to that reopening was a lot, and it took a long time. Slater says the Marshall Fire damaged their fencing, outdoor play areas, and also burned down a barn. The day of the fire, they had about 40 dogs in their care. After stuffing as many as they could in their cars, they let the remaining dogs run free in order to survive. Now, in the end, all those dogs were found safely. To this day, Slater keeps a reminder from that day, their entry sign, in order to never forget.
One of my employees picked it up and saved it, thinking that maybe at some time it wouldn't represent the tragedy, but it would represent the strength and resilience of the community. And so it brought me to tears when I saw it.
Slater says insurance would not cover the pea gravel that the dogs play on, but thanks to community fundraising, they were able to completely replace it.
Our exposure to UV radiation from the sun and artificial sources is increasing. That's according to the World Health Organization. As the ozone layer gets thinner, it absorbs less of the harmful rays. All of this makes skin protection more important.
Melanoma rates in the United States have continued to increase at about 3% a year for decades. And it's actually quite frightening, one of the fastest growing cancers in the United States.
David Andrews, a senior scientist with the Environmental Working Group, has spent more than a decade studying sunscreens. In their latest testing report released today, they found that of the more than 1,800 products, only about 25% provided adequate protection and did not contain concerning chemicals. Andrews says sunscreens with really high SPF numbers on the label are especially concerning.
Because those products really can provide a false sense of security where people feel that they can stay in the sun longer and actually change their behavior because they're using a sunscreen product. Those high SPF products don't necessarily provide more protection, and many of those products actually don't provide an increased amount of UVA protection.
Now, another buyer beware from the report is spray sunscreen. It's due to concerns that inhaling the sunscreen could be harmful. Australia recommends people avoid them altogether after testing found that even with just a light breeze, you don't actually get enough sunscreen on your skin to provide adequate protection. And testing in the U.S. found some aerosols were contaminated with benzene, a known carcinogen, which led to a recall.
How people use sunscreens has changed significantly. Now we apply it to our whole body. We're told to apply it daily every time we go outside. But that also means we're being exposed to these chemicals daily, and they may be absorbing into our bodies. So we need that safety testing to ensure they're safe.
Now, last fall, the FDA proposed changes to improve sunscreens. It includes labeling changes like limiting the SPF number to 60, increasing standards for UVA protection, additional testing for aerosols to make sure they're not harmful, and additional safety testing on sunscreen ingredients, some of which have already been proven to be safer and provide better protection. Now, these have also been used for years in products in Europe.
So it's a little bit of a regulatory black hole where ultimately the people who are losing out are consumers, and consumers are stuck with what are essentially decades old formulations in the United States. And there may be much better options for providing sun protection.
Now, the proposed sunscreen rule changes wouldn't be finalized until this fall, and then they would take more time to implement. For now, you can find the top-rated sunscreens on the Environmental Working Group's website. The best scoring contains zinc oxide, titanium dioxide, or both, and have fewer health concerns. Emergency rental assistance will be running out soon, but more help could be coming from a place you may not expect.
The benefit of the pandemic is that I think eviction became a bigger part of the national conversation, but this is really an everyday issue.
How he and other law school students are working to help prevent evictions long term.
Also coming up, a life-saving sacrifice for a complete stranger. We meet the man who gave up part of an organ to save a Colorado mom's life.